The Death Guard, a traitor legion steeped in the power of Nurgle, the chaos god of death, disease, and despair. Their bodies are hives of filth and decay, their flesh eternally rotting away, even as it is renewed by the ceaseless process of death and rebirth. The Death Guard are pretty dang cool, but you know who else is cool? Skaven, especially those of Clan Pestilence. I decided to take the age-old trope of Space Skaven and build a Death Guard army around it, incorporating themes across both models. Today I'm going to show you the process that I took and showcase my army using this, a Death Guard hero that I won in a blind buy. I'm going to take both of these heroes, I'm going to kit bash a little bit, repaint them, show you my whole process to make my Space Skaven Death Guard army, and showcase the entire army at the end. Now these guys are already pretty nicely painted. They've got nice greens, their fleshy bits are really cool, there's some really good weathering and verdigris on the bell. There's even a nice little Nurgle butt over here, but these are Space Skaven Death Guard. We got to do a little bit of kit bashing, so we're going to have to strip them and add a few things. As you can see, my Death Guard scheme is whitish gray with bronze trim. Every single model in this army has to have a small kit bash on it to bring that theme of Skaven back, and I'm going to show you how I do that. My name's Chris, I like to paint things, and using all of the processes in this video, I turned this pile of gray plastic into this gorgeous Death Guard Skaven army, and I'll show you how I did it. So step one, we gotta strip all of our models. Now to do that, I use isopropyl alcohol. Usually you'd want like 90% or higher, but I didn't have any on hand. So we're gonna see how this goes.
For the glory of chaos!
Now,
Death to the false
my
emperor!
Tupperware was definitely not big enough. Now after you find a suitably sized container, you're gonna place your Death Guard models laying down and drown them in some ISO. For this amount of ISO, you're going to have to leave them in for a good amount of time. 90% you can usually get away with a little bit less time, 15 to 20 minutes, but I believe I left these guys overnight. I gave them a good shake to make sure the entire model was covered and shook it a few times throughout the day. After that, I stripped the paint as best I could in the sink with a toothbrush, and didn't really work too well. I gave them 2 dunks, but this ISO is just not strong enough. I will say the paint on it is so fine that I'm really not super worried about painting over it. Then I left them to dry for a little while. Realistically, the next step I'm doing, you could probably do when they're wet and it might make it a little bit easier. But I took a hobby knife and a sharp metal poker and I just cleaned up a bunch of areas, got any thick bits of paint. The red on like their weird little gore bits was really easy to come off. Now we gotta kit bash them. I have a big old bag of Nurgle and Skaven bits, all kind of together, obviously, because I gotta use both at the same time. So I dump out some of these Plague Monk bits, and we try and look to see what's gonna fit. The most obvious is gonna be to replace this little Nurgling here with a little rat. So to do that, I grabbed some of the Tamiya extra thin, I chopped off that little Nurgling, and I'm gonna glue this little rat. I'm using the Tamiya here because I trimmed the Nurgling's hand down to bare plastic because I want to fuse the plastic.
We ride to battle!
It's such a small contact point, we need it to stay. And I think that's pretty hilarious, don't you? For this model, I decided to do the kit bash off camera, but I gave him a little book in his hand and we can put some Skaven runes on the bottom. Now, I just bought some green stuff, but I'm kind of terrified to try it on a model that I really want to be good. So instead, we're going to hide an ugly seam with some hobby chain. This is a trick I use all the time, because again, I haven't really learned the sculpting part of this hobby yet. That might be my next step. Maybe I'll do a whole video on how I learned how to do that. But we take some really tiny hobby chain and just wrap it around. It almost kind of looks like he's chained the book to his hand, or he just likes chains, he thinks they're cool. He might be kind of edgy, you know. He is a mutated chaos marine with a cool book that he wants to show you. And then I put a little rat friend at his base, because rat friends at base make the rat swarm look more cohesive. There they are. Really basic kit bashes go a long way in this army. Almost every single model has like 1 or 2 small pieces attached that just kind of change the vibe and make it my own. Then I took them outside and gave them a primer of black spray paint from the bottom, and then like 80% coverage with a gray, specifically Rust-Oleum Flat Gray 2X, the quote-unquote God's gift to humanity of spray paints. So the basis of my palette is these 5 colors: a medium gray, Balthazar gold, auburn shadow for all the leather, carnage red for the weapons, and then oozing purple for all of the nurgly bits. Now, because Grey Seer's a Citadel paint, it's dried up, go figure, so I kinda had to mix my own, which I'm looking for a new paint to completely replace it anyway. I had to take a bright gray and slowly mix it with a black to get essentially the same color, but I'd prefer not to do that for a full army project. I used this dark blue gray, and I think I did about 2 full dry brushes of this, using my dry brushes exclusively for white paint. It's a very good tip for you guys to keep. So the first is a pretty heavy dry brush of, I couldn't give you the ratios of the mixture, but I tried to just make Grey Seer again. So if you have Grey Seer and yours isn't dried up like mine, you're essentially gonna be doing that. Now this is a pretty good overbrush, but it should be lighter than the gray spray paint primer. Then I did a second round of this with a little bit more leather white in it, or a little bit less black, however you want to do it, to really catch the edges. We're going to do a proper highlight of these later, but this is really going to build up the layers of color in our armor. Now remember, when you paint white, you're never painting white. You're always painting gray and highlighting with white. So I do the lightest dry brush of Corax white, which, if you don't know Citadel paints, should be shaken every 20 to 30 minutes or it will go completely nasty. But this brings out all the nice edges and detail for the next step: trim. Chaos players love trim. Next, we have to do the rest of our base coating using the other colors I showed you earlier. My favorite thing to paint in this army is all the purple nurgly bits, and this oozing purple is light enough to really take advantage of that sort of pre-shading we did with the dry brushing. Think kind of how you'd be doing that, the slap chop method, essentially. It keeps those raised areas looking slightly different than the lower areas. Obviously a wash is going to bring that out stronger later. This guy even has a tail, perhaps? I'm not sure. He is a rat. Now my other favorite color is Steel Legion Drab, and I use this for all of the bone bits. I forgot about it in my showcase because it doesn't feature prominently on many of the models, but any of these weird bone growths, I love this color for that. It's a very earthy chaos color. And then another one of my formerly favorite Citadel colors, Storm Vermin Fur, I used on all of the cloth on these guys, but that paint is also almost completely solid. So I used some water to try and at least get the pigment up. I don't know, it's bad. Someone help me fix this. I have no idea how to do it. So I just did like 19 really thin layers of it to make it work. Then I used Auburn Shadow to do all the wood and leather bits. It's not a whole lot of them on these models, but it's a nice breakup. It's just a normal looking color. It's not too distracting again. These guys are very subtle, but the overall effect I think is worth it. It's a nice little color for the robes on all of the rats too, mostly because the rats are going to be albino rats. They're going to be white with red eyes, so just giving them a nice brown rather than like gray robes is a good idea. And then there was no gun on this model after I did some modifications, so I decided to give him 2 fingers red. Not all 4, just 2. I don't know, don't ask me. Just kind of winging it at this point. I did make his case on his gun red because he's not actually holding a bolter in his hand. The fun thing about characters is you can make just decisions that are slightly different to the rest of the army. For instance, this plasma gun, it's already gonna have orange plasma. That's what I really wanted to do, so it would look pretty silly if the whole gun was red. I used a speed paint orange over a white ink just to, you know, do the world's fastest plasma. It's not even gonna look that great, I just kinda want it to look different. I'm not really into the whole super glowing plasma, I just like it functional, not flashy or glowy. A really nice color that's not in my original Death Guard recipe is this gold bullion color from Turbo Dork. I have a couple videos where I used it before, I'll link those up top, but I'm gonna kinda dry brush this on over all of the gold colors, so the bells, that sort of thing. On the previous Death Guard, I used an Army Painter gold, which I find super glittery, but this gold, extremely nice, and I'm not gonna do thick, heavy layers because you need like 6 layers for it to really go down well. I'm just gonna do a dry brush of it, like an overbrush, to really solidify that gold without going crazy, making it lose some of the detail. Then I give the entire model a black wash. I used to use Null oil for this, but again, I'm really trying to get away from those Citadel paints. So I have these Vallejo washes that come in like 30 different colors. They're really great. 30 might be excessive, but I think the pack is like 8 colors, and it's really nice to have like a blue wash and a green wash. The wash is what really brings this armor to life. When I was coming up with the formula for this armor, I went with gray over white because I liked the way the black wash looked on it. After that first wash dies, we need to add a little bit of grime, so I like to use Seraphim Sepia because it's a beautiful color over all of the gold because it really brings out the richness of that gold. And I also like to put it on a few areas just to create some gross, like, drooping mess, just some staining from all the pustules and the fluids that are leaking out of Death Guard. Just a couple of these is all you really need to sell the effect, and they stain really heavily over the gray armor. I also decided to make the book look really, really tarnished. I haven't decided what I'm going to put on the book yet, but I added this wash there, and also put it over a lot of the brass, bronze armor bits, and even just splattered on some on the robes just to really add some grime and grossness. And as that was drying, I decided to highlight the rest of the armor. A really good way to highlight chains without like having to individually highlight each link is to just do a nice dry brush of a bright metal over it. Especially on these guys, it keeps them nice and rough looking. I also dry brush this over all the gold to bring out the edges. On weathered gold, it's really fun to give it a blue-green wash to add some verdigris, and I've always liked how tarnished it looks.
finna get paid every day, I'ma do my way. Don't care what you finna say, I'ma talk to I'm a 19, leave me alone, let me breathe, okay. Yeah, I'm okay, I just let my space. I start wars, I'll leave no trace. Wars on time, I'm never late.
This is Splinter Fang the Pale, my leader. Splinter Fang and his assorted cult of ratmen pled their allegiance to Nurdle and were given a host of vile plague marines and demon engines to spread disease. He counts as a malignant plague caster, mostly because I actually hate that model. I love this guy. He's built out of an old metal Skaven model and was a joy to paint up. These are my standard Plague Marines, painted in the same style as you'll see in this video. Every single one has some sort of big to small kit bash, whether it be I'm just changing the gong they're holding, I added a back banner, the weapons, something Skaven-y. I didn't want to go too much, but just enough that you could tell who they really belong to, and tie them in with all the Plague Monks that I use as the poxwalkers. As you can see, I gave my leader a back banner, which I think is fun because Space Marines need more back banners, chaos or otherwise. Here I have my Plague Monks that count as poxwalkers. Now, rats should be fast, but I kind of like that these infected rats have to be really, really slow. They were really fun to kit bash up. I added some cyborg gubbins and made these two look like they're holding little bells, which I think is kind of fun. The freehand on the book of the squad leader was really, really enjoyable to paint. That's my first foray into freehanding. Every single one just has a few extra bits and pieces to make it look more futuristic and a little bit more, I'll say, having a hard time. Almost like a servitor or something. Next up, we have my giant rats. The giant rats were 3D prints I got off of Etsy that I added a bunch of extra kit bash stuff. So all of those chains, the death guard pieces like that hand and that axe, they weren't on the original model. I just added those to really, really sell them as some sci-fi messed up rats, including that cool bell around the neck of the brown one. They were a great experiment in both weathering and skin tone. I really enjoyed giving each one their own skin tone because I wanted them to all be different and almost more like their own character. Each one's kind of got something different going on, a different vibe. This is my Plague Burst Crawler, which was probably the largest vehicle I painted at the time. I tried to really, really make it dirty by using like inks over water and letting like a splashing effect happen. It works really well in some areas and really poorly in others. I fucking love this model. This is my favorite model in the whole army. I think he came out so cool, but I don't know if I could ever get another one because painting him was a chore, and I don't think I'll be able to recreate the same effects that I did on the first one. I don't know, it's just so cool. I love the Plague Burst Crawler. It's just a weird little angry tank that eats you. And I put little rats on the sides to really sell it. These are the stars of today's episode, all painted up and finalized. I believe I did add a few things to the plasma after I filmed this video, but I honestly can't remember. He's not sitting next to me. And I redid the freehand on the book here because I hated the way the first one came out. I really hope you liked watching my process, and now I'm going to leave you with some glamour shots of the full army. And that's it. I hope you liked this army showcase. If you have any questions about some of the models or how I achieved any of the effects, feel free to ask. If you have any cool suggestions of little light conversions I could do to make other Skaven and or Death Guard models kind of work in this, please let me know because I'm always looking to expand. I have like a dozen armies and I'm going to do some showcase videos like this going forward if you think they're cool. Most of them are kit bashed and they're kind of weird and different. That's how I like doing it. Regardless, I didn't say it at the beginning, but my name's Chris. I like to paint things, and you have a good one, okay? Take it easy, have a good night, like, comment, subscribe if you really, really want to. That would be cool. If not, I'll get over it. Bye.